Hello guys, welcome to Talking News, Chasing a Murder. Please subscribe and like right now to help support this channel. Also hit that notification bell if you'd like notifications. Guys, we're on the Lori Vallow Then and Now part 4. I need to remind you guys that it's going to be difficult for me to find a solid environment since we're all locked up in the same house. As you might know, a lot of us are having to run room to room, especially if you're trying to do business or work. Now on the part 3, we kind of went over their religion just a little bit. We just touched on it basically because there's a lot more to it. We learned about Julie Rowe, who is also within that group. She's been excommunicated from the LDS Church. And on part 4, we're going to actually start with Julie Rowe because right now she's writing all these books. She thinks, well, she says she's a visionary. She teaches classes on energy. She does a few things, but she's having to deal with the LDS is starting to contact her because they have concerns about her teachings. And what I hear is Julie Rowe is gathering quite a big following at this time. So this is a friend of Chad Daybell. And on January 5th of 2019, Julie Rowe is meeting with her state president. She gets, her husband gets a text from the bishop asking them to meet him on Sunday morning. This information come off a video that she did an interview on Eyes Wide Open, I think is what it's called. She quoted, "I am really a visionary. The Lord really does tell me everything going on," end quote. So when she goes into this meeting Sunday, Julie says it's her birthday. It's January 6th. And in this meeting, she is accused of teaching false doctrine. She shares that the president tells her that he didn't like her books, her podcasts, or her energy readings. He then tells her he wants to meet with her again. Okay, guys, I apologize. I can't get rid of this background noise. So it's approximately January 2019. Right? Lori emails Chad Daybell a video of herself dancing. So according to some documents, Charles found this video because Lori is not really a technology savvy girl. So she didn't delete it from the email that was in the sent folder. Sounds like she deleted it but forgot about the send folder. So that happens a lot. So these are the very early signs where Chad's figuring out, most likely Lori's having an affair with this man named Chad Daybell. And this is in January, guys. Guys, we may have to kind of skip around a little bit. So in late January of 2019, it's approximately about 2 weeks before Charles Vallow files for divorce from Lori Vallow. So a few documents say that at that point, Lori Vallow takes their son JJ, who is 7 years old, moves out of Chandler, Arizona home that they share. And according to Larry Woodcock, the grandfather of JJ, he's saying that Lori said that she no longer cared for Charles or JJ. So around that period of time, somewhere in there, Charles gets JJ, but when he does, Lori disappears for about 58 days. And that's a little bit in the future because this is a month later. So let me go ahead and say it just in case I didn't put it in the correct place. So she disappears 58 days in February. When she didn't have any of her children. She wasn't with her husband. Nobody knows where she was. It remains unclear where she went during those weeks before returning to the children. January 28th of 2019, Enterprise Rent-A-Car emails Charles Vallow to say that 2,000 points were transferred out of his rewards account. But Charles does some research on his own and realizes that Lori had transferred those points. So now remember guys, these dates are still kind of new. They're conflicting, and this story's so big that when I do work on one area and update it, another area is updating. It's just hard to keep up with all of it, so I'm doing the best I can with what I have. and I'll update as we go along. But on January 28th and 29th of 2019, Lori makes multiple transfers of this money totaling $35,000 from Charles Vallow's business accounts to the personal account. She then removes the money from the personal account to another unknown bank account. Kay Vallow, which is Charles Vallow's sister, actually describes some of these instances later on in interviews. And we'll go over some as we get to those dates. Charles says he tries to stop the payments or the transfers, but Lori is the signatory and the payment could not be stopped. January 29th of 2019, Charles says that Lori called that day and told him that she was a god and a translated being who cannot taste death, sent by God to lead 144,000 into the millennium. You can find this in documentations of Charles' divorce papers. Also, this is when Charles actually gets an order of protection during these divorce filings. In those paperworks, he also says that it's telling Charles that she's having spiritual revelations as well as visions to help her gather and prepare for those chosen to live in the New Jerusalem after the Great War. Lori then mentions about prophecies in the book of Revelations and threatened to murder her husband Charles if he stood in her way. According to Lori Vallow, she said she had angels that were there to help her do whatever she needed to do in order to complete her mission. She's basically telling Charles Vallow that there's nothing going to stop her for helping for Christ's second coming. That second coming was imminent. And according to Lori, Jesus was headed to earth on July 2020. Lori Vallow called Charles Vallow back the very next day. So it's January 30th of 2019. Lori had been married to Charles Vallow nearly 13 years at this point, guys. I think I forgot to mention that. When she talked to Charles this time, she referred to him in a strange manner, using a strange name. She was calling Charles by Nick Schneider. Charles asked her. He says, "Who is Nick Schneider?" Lori Vallow responds with, "Nick is your real name." Lori informed Charles that Nick had killed Charles and has taken his identity. According to a few documents, before hanging up, Lori went on to say that she planned to kill him whenever he returned home from his trip. And supposedly, this is where she mentions that there were angels there to help dispose of his body. So at this point, Lori Vallow has threatened Charles' life multiple times. And again, like the second time was when he was to return back to Arizona. And I think I forgot to mention that she also said to Charles, you know, she was going to ruin him every way she could, including financially. In late January of 2019, I don't have the exact date right now, Charles Vallow files a petition with the Community Bridges Healthcare for a 72-hour hold and an evaluation. So the staff from there called the Gilbert police to bring Lori in for treatment if they made contact with her. But January 31st of 2019, that morning, Lori takes JJ to school. While she is walking JJ inside, Charles Vallow arrives. There's a report made that Lori's purse, phone, and car keys were taken by Charles. According to some documents, they say he did this in order to keep her there so that the police could come and pick her up to have her evaluated. Lori had a spare key, so she was able to leave and get away. Lori Vallow is adamant that she believes in what she's saying. Anyways, officers had to respond to this harassment call that Lori made, making Charles out trying to anyways, as a person that stole her purse and phone from her car. She described that he actually did this while she was dropping off JJ at school, which I mentioned. But Lori actually starts to accuse Charles of cheating. She says, "This time I caught him cheating, and I had evidence, and I told him about it. And he travels a lot for business, so I told him about it, and he told him," I think that's a mistype, guys, "not to come home, and that his stuff would be gone, and that his car would be gone. He was a little mad," end quote. So this supposedly happened not on this date. It's hard to get these dates completely straight right now. They're a mess. Each place has a different timeline. But some sources say that this happened a few days before Charles actually filed for divorce. So hopefully this is the correct date. Some sources say that there's actual body cam of this incident. So I will tell you that this is supposedly January 31st of 2019 if you want to look up those records. Some sources say that the way that Lori reported this was she walked into the Gilbert Police Department with Tylee. We're also hearing, which this name is interesting, Melanie Gibb was there. Now Melanie Gibb is one of the people that are involved with preparing the people. You'll hear her name several times. Another source says that she said, quote, "He's mad because I took the money out of our account, but it's a joint account, so he wants me to give him money," end quote. Some pretty interesting information. It sounds like Charles Vallow went through a lot of trouble to try to locate her during this time. It says that he found a hotel key card for the Hyatt and that he was trying to figure out where Lori was staying. During this as well, one of Charles' friends named Leo is concerned about JJ's welfare. They also talk about waiting for JJ to go to school, and that's when they can go pick her up for an involuntary hold order. Anyways, I'm not certain who this person is that he's talking to now. It said that they could not do a sting operation in order to pick Lori up. Mentioned something about going to a bank, so I couldn't really get a lot of information on that. So also in January sometime, it is told that Lori is staying with her brother Alex Cox at one point, and Lori and Alex Cox are seen arguing quite loudly in the street outside of his home in Santan Valley, Arizona. People said it seemed that they were married the way that they were arguing. One witness said, quoted Lori, she was screaming at him, accusing him of bringing disgrace to the family. It says the date's unknown, but I went ahead and put it in here just in case. I got a little mixed up on a few dates, guys, because it's just really difficult putting this together. There's so much. But so far, we see Charles going way out of his way to try to help Lori. He's trying his best. And I don't think she realized that she is just not mentally stable. And this is the worst part about it. So moving on to February 1st of 2019, Lori Vallow actually checked herself into the community bridges. She was there for a mental health evaluation and was discharged only a few hours later. So Chad actually, in February as well, writes the foreword for author of Melanie Gibbs, sorry guys, a new book that's called Feel the Fire. Now you'll want to write this note down because also in February of 2019, Chad allegedly tells author friend Julie Rowe that he and Tammy are tight on money and that he's doing his best to keep his marriage together. I don't see how that can work when he's using Lori's dancing videos as a distraction from that. Also, that month, Lori's first grandchild is born to Colby and his wife, her older son. Charles didn't show up at the hospital, but Lori did. And during that time, Colby says, you know, he was a new parent. He was just trying to figure out things for himself at the time in his life. During the time, all this drama was going on between Lori and Charles Vallow. What he did share was Lori had convinced Colby that Charles was the one that was cheating. Colby said when he heard this kind of upset him and he was angry at Charles. Also, according to Colby, Charles tried an attempt to contact family members to tell them that he was innocent of cheating. But Colby said he wasn't interested in talking to him at that time. In February 2019, while in Kauai, Lori tells a friend, I think it was actually Annie Ryan, which is the sister-in-law, when she was married to Joseph Ryan, that Charles has been having an affair and that he turned mean and violent. Her friend says, well, that didn't seem like the Charles Vallow she knew, and it seemed like Lori was villainizing Charles Vallow. Lori also shared that she sabotaged Charles Vallow by canceling his flight home to Arizona and taking his truck from the airport and so on. So it's definitely in February 2019 that everything's fueling up. Lori also tells Annie about Chad Daybell's books and podcasts. Lori's actually sharing that she's been on podcasts and that she's been hanging out with this new religious group, which is Preparing the People. One of the people that she mentions in the group is Zulema. Lori tells her that Zulema has the power to control elements. According to Lori's friend, she said Lori really seemed fascinated by all this. She was very excited to tell her about all these powers that this Zulema had. So according to a few articles, Lori, she's telling, I think it's Annie Ryan that they're referring to, that, well, Lori says, I believe that you're one of the 144,000 chosen ones. And her friend just said it was laughable. And Lori mentions that the reason that she is there is to try to gather her. So when you hear Charles Vallow mention that she's a gatherer as well as Melanie's husband's, well, you have a third person that's saying the same thing. So obviously this is absolute truth. Now I want to remind you why I'm doing these videos, and we have 2 missing children. We have Tylee and JJ still missing. And I figured if I do new stories, this will keep it fresh in people's mind. But anyways, I don't want people to lose focus that this is for Tylee and JJ. So also in February 2019, Tylee spends most of her time in Kauai sleeping. And according to some people, they said that she seems depressed. Now, according to Annie, she says that Lori's really focused on talking about death. So Lori told her friend Annie that Charles Vallow was already dead and had a demon living inside of him. But later, Lori changed her story to say that she expected to get a call any day saying Charles Vallow was dead. So I want to take a minute to talk about that. So here we're wondering, who's really the enemy here? Chad Daybell is out of jail. But who picked up whose books? Who took up whose teachings? So to be honest with you, I would have to say that Chad's day is coming very soon. His manipulation, trying to get rid of the people in her life so that he could have her to himself, that's what it seems like to me, will come to its end. I think investigators are hard at work to do this, and I look forward to it. So we're still in February, and Charles Vallow and Lori are battling still. And there's a time where Charles says he's caring for JJ, but Lori refuses to return JJ's medicine, clothing, iPad, and the service dog's special collar. And during that period that JJ's staying with him, he says that Lori never called to check on JJ, wasn't concerned about his well-being whatsoever. And this bothered Charles because JJ had a lot of problems, such as he was dealing with autism, and it was very difficult for Charles to understand that suddenly she just didn't care anymore. On February 4th of 2019, Charles is talking to his attorney, and he has fear for his own life. Again, they mentioned there that he files an order of protection against Lori. And like I mentioned, the dates are difficult to put into complete order at this time. So, according to Charles' attorney, he said Charles told him that day, "I want to make sure that everyone knows that if something happens to me, Lori and Alex did it," end quote. Also, this order also requests a protection for JJ and says that Lori is a danger to JJ. Also in that document, it states that Lori did not possess any firearms and that she must participate in counseling. In addition, it also states that Lori is to stay away from Charles Vallow's Gilbert home. Oh wait, it's more than that as well. So she's, told to stay away from JJ's school, Lawrence Institute of Education, as well as his workplace. February 5th of 2019, JJ is absent from Life Academy. On February 5th of 2019, Charles Vallow receives an email from an employee about commission money owed to the employee. So this employee actually threatens to take legal action if he doesn't get paid soon. And this all come about because Lori had emptied Charles' business account. So this is what they're saying is the exact date on the rental car. I'm not certain. It's February 6th of 2019. Charles realized that Lori had transferred the 2,000 rental car points out of their account. Lori had also called JJ's school to ask if he was in class. And Charles' concern was that he was worried that she was going to use these rental points to check JJ out of school, take off with him. But, he wasn't sure where she would go. February 8, 2019, Charles Vallow begins the initial process of filing for a divorce against Lori. But it says that in March, at the time I collected this information, he drops that divorce and remained legally married, which we hear Kay, Charles' sister, mentioned that, they went through this a few times. So if you want those records, it's in Maricopa court records. I know when the story first came out, it had February 8th as the time he did file for divorce. So still. So again, I want to mention who Charles Vallow's attorney was. It was Stephen Ellsworth. And he expressed that, Charles did have genuine fear for his own life. His attorney also mentions that JJ was Charles' main concern. He wanted to make sure that JJ was safe and cared for and that he had a routine. The sad part is he wasn't able to help Tylee because he didn't adopt her and he wasn't her biological father. So what we have learned so far is that Lori is now having visions. It isn't just Chad Daybell or Julie Rowe. Some sources say that Lori had visions of her spouse dying. February 11th of 2019, the sheriff of Orange County, California, contacts Charles and discusses filing theft charges against Lori for taking the business money. Also on the 11th, Charles Vallow visits Life Academy and claims Lori has gone crazy and is hearing religious voices. He told them about how Lori had disappeared and no one knew where she was, and he had a protection order against Lori. According to this information by KTVB7, he actually pulled JJ out of school, taking him out of state until he was safe. So here are other dates where they're talking about the $35,000 that she's taken. And on February 14th of 2019, Valentine's Day, Charles Vallow signs a divorce paperwork that outlines in detail all that Lori has done and said the last few months. It's at this point that Charles Vallow says he wants sole custody of his adopted son. He also mentions that he wants the properties and the money that Lori took returned. So Charles Vallow, through his attorney, electronically files for divorce. A day after he signed them, the documents say that Lori threatened Charles, telling him she was a god. And we've already heard this. We just don't know exactly where this fits in. So February 15th of 2019, Charles' lawyers file a second document asking for temporary custody of JJ. as well as asking for exclusive use of the house and vehicle. February also, Charles Vallow learns that Lori was going to Boise with a friend to talk or at least speak at a conference. But before Lori left, Charles and his attorneys make attempts to serve Lori divorce papers and the order of protection papers at the airport, hotel, and a public event. It says these attempts were unsuccessful, so you can read up on this on Fox 10 Phoenix. Also, on February 15th through 16th of 2019, Chad is attending a 2-day event in Boise and Middleton, Idaho. So Chad speaks at the event. And according to the organizers of these events, they say this is the last time Chad spoke at one of their events. But we do know that he was lined up to speak later. Also, sometime in February, I don't have the exact date, Charles hears that Lori is living with her brother Alex Cox. And this must be where the argument happened. She must have been living off and on when she disappeared with him in Santan Valley, Arizona. Charles knows this because they tried to serve her the papers at Alex Cox's house. But they had to report they were unsuccessful despite the fact that both Lori and Alex Cox's cars were in the driveway. I want to make sure that I mention that also, and I think we already covered it, but just in case, so February of 2019, no exact date, that it mentions that Lori and Tylee checked into a Kauai resort. And so does it fit in now or later? I think it was the one back before that we covered. But they say that they stayed there for approximately around a month. And this information comes from the resort workers. Now, the end of February, Charles brings JJ back to the Life Academy. February 21st of 2019, officials at JJ's school, Lawrence Institute for Education, they make a CPS because Lori had still not been located at that time. Sometime in late February, Charles Vallow is talking to his sister, Kay Woodcock, about his life insurance. So Kay Woodcock quoted, "Charles and I had a conversation. He had a $1 million policy with Lori as the beneficiary, and he told me he wanted me to be the sole recipient. I told him to leave it to his boys, but he was worried about what Lori would do," in quotes. March 1st of 2019, it says, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but it comes from the Post-Register, that Charles files to dismiss proceedings against Lori. So right now, Lori's hopping all over the place, hanging out with Chad and his group. She's abandoned the children a couple of times. She pulls Tylee to Hawaii and back. And now she's manipulating him in the divorce. And a lot of people say it's because of that $1 million policy that Charles has. She's just trying to prolong it until she can do what people believe or allege that she planned to do in the near future. Anyways, they remain married legally, but they were separated, and that's according to Maricopa County Court records. Annie said that she actually heard that Lori and Charles had got back together and assumed whatever crisis Lori had been having had passed. So March 9th, Julie Rowe is super sick, and March 10th, Julie Rowe is scheduled for another meeting with the LDS Church. And, well, here we go. So Julie Rowe gets a call saying that she didn't show up to the meeting with the LDS leaders. This is because she wasn't feeling well, and she let them know. They proceeded to tell her that she was on probation, and they took her temple card. They then proceeded to inform her that she would be going to church court. According to Julie Rowe, on a video on Eyes Wide Open, she said that she ended up going to the meeting that night. She said it went okay. She told them she took the podcast down, the spirit was in the room and told her to. But she said the spirit told her that it wouldn't be forever. So sometime in late March or early April, Kay is helping Charles pack up his stuff to move back to Houston, Texas. While they were packing, Kay mentioned that Lori come in, like she owned the place basically, walked in and started fussing at Charles. Kay said that Lori had her hands on her hip and asked, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" Kay said that Charles was just sitting. "Why are you keeping JJ from me?" Charles responds with, quote, "I am moving to be closer to my family," end quote. And Lori says, "What family?" He says, "My family in Louisiana." Kay Woodcock said that she stood there thinking, what the heck? He has no family. Who are we? Kay describes that Charles and Lori continued to talk and then went into the bedroom to talk privately. After Lori was through talking with Charles, Kay says when she started to leave, she walked over. "I was at the kitchen table on the PC." Lori says, "Well, KK." That's what Lori calls Kay Woodcock. Anyways, Kay responded with, "I'm sorry this is happening with y'all. We can still talk." Okay, guys, now remember, some of these pictures aren't exact. They're just put in there as fillers. Sometimes I can't find the pictures of the people, and that makes it a little difficult. And I'm having to do this in a hurry while dealing with everything that's going on. I have a lot going on. So anyways, I hope this is getting the information out there, at least keeping the interest for the kids, because we still don't know where they are. I want to say thanks for watching, guys. You guys stay safe. Love you guys, and I'll see you soon.